What is up, Las Vegas and friends? We are back with the 6th episode of the Guest List podcast. And in the building, well, I wouldn't say in the building, it's across from me on the screen, is the co-creator of SWANevada, which is the Sex Workers Alliance of Nevada. I want everyone to go into this conversation with an open mind, because I know the word sex workers could be a little misleading, it's a little ambiguous, and there's a lot of myths that surround it, especially depending on where you are along the political and religious spectrum. Your opinions are probably very different than the person across from you or on the opposite side. And because of this, the sex workers face a lot of backlash and could even lead into abuse. And the person across from me today has worked very hard on this project. He's a very passionate person. And I'm excited to learn what the sex worker industry is and everything surrounding SWANevada. And I've known this guest for quite some time. We go back to our college days. She's one of the most genuine people that I know. And without further ado, I want to introduce Miss Jazz Appin. All right, Jazz, thank you for coming on to the show today. How are you doing?
For having me. Very good. Thank you.
I was so excited when you agreed to come on to this because I know you've been working on SWANevada for quite some time. And I remember seeing you on the news towards the end of last year.
Almost a year ago now, actually. It'll be a year in 1 month from now.
That's wild. Also, I do want to say congrats on the talent show that you hosted yesterday. I got to tune into the first half of it. There was 3 talented individuals. There was a striptease. There was a woman that was singing and played the guitar. And there, yeah.
Well, with pasties,
with the pasties on, of course. Right on cue. And the ventriloquist, who was hilarious.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy that you got to see the ventriloquist. That was probably my favorite act. I was just like shook at how funny and unique and original that was. Oh my gosh, I loved it.
She's funny. How did the rest of the show go?
It went really great. We definitely had a fair share of pole dancing, right? We got a lot of talented pole dancers in our community. Then we also had, there was this really great act where the beginning was like an acro yoga flow, which turned into like a song where they were playing the guitar and it was like a duet singing together. And we had a nice variety and it went really well. We'd never done anything like that before, especially not virtually. So I'm really pleased and feel like it was quite a success. We ended up last I heard, we raised over like $2,000. So not bad for our first time.
It's amazing, especially that you have to put on for your co-creation. And you have to say you were a natural at the MC. From what I was watching, that it was flowing very well.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
So before we go into the content of the conversation involving sex workers and everything else in SWANevada, let's build some context for who is Jazz. And so can you give us a brief description, minute, 2 minutes of just your childhood, how you ended up in Vegas and leading up to SWANevada?
Sure, yeah. So I like to start reminding people that I'm an immigrant and I was born in Panama. So even though I don't look like or sound like what a lot of people think that might look like, I've got dual citizenship, which means I have the privilege of having citizenship in the US and in Panama. And I think that experience definitely informs a lot of like what I do and who I am to this day. I didn't stay in Panama long, though. I definitely grew up in the States and spent almost all of my life here. I only lived in Panama for the first year of my life. And after that, kind of moved around a lot growing up and then eventually landed in Vegas. And I've been here now longer than anywhere else I've been. I moved here when I was, I think, 13. And moved to the east side, which I know you are too, right?
All day, Shat Pride,
yeah,
all day.
Exactly. I would have gone to Chaparral. Had I not gone to LVA, you know, the magnet school, I was zoned for Chaparral. I remember when I found out that you were too. East side.
All day. A lot of people hate on the East Side. We're always Shap is always the epitome of the meme jokes on Facebook. I can't do it.
Let them hate though, for real. Let them hate. I think I even took a summer school course at Chap. You know, in between the regular school years. So yeah, I've lived all over the valley a little bit, but mostly on the East Side and a little bit by the South Point. So yeah, I would definitely say that moving here at such a formative time in my life, like, is another thing that really informed the person who I've become. And so yeah, I guess, so you and I met at UNLV, a school that I definitely didn't see myself going to in high school, when I had, like, you know, big dreams about the place I would go for college, and initially, you know, felt almost disappointed that, you know, that UNLV was the school that I was going to go to. You know, you've heard UNLV stands for You Never Leave Vegas.
It's so true. But the people who always leave Vegas and go to UNR always come back after a year or two.
That is so true, though. That is so true. They're like, I can't hang with those people out there.
and once they graduate Reno, 95% end up moving back afterwards.
That's so true. You know, like, I used to think that would have been the worst thing, right, for me to get stuck in Vegas, but I also experienced, you know, the feeling of coming back, because it's been on and off in my adult life. Like, I lived in Colorado briefly, and then also studied abroad in Costa Rica for, you know, a year-long program, and that actually was probably the experience that, like, really informed the way that I feel about Vegas now, and, like, showed me how much I actually do love it, despite how, you know, angsty I had been in the past about it, you know, feeling like UNLV wasn't good enough, or this, that, and the other. Like, as time went on, I realized that, like, this was actually really the place that I felt like I was supposed to be. So yeah, UNLV, I studied Gender and Sexuality Studies, which with a Spanish minor. Which, even that right there, a lot of people are like, what is Gender and Sexuality Studies? Is that a real major? Which, yes, it is. If folks are a little bit more familiar maybe with the discipline of women's studies, Gender and Sexuality Studies is definitely like some could say it's what women's studies has evolved into. Some would say it's slightly different, but it's got a lot in common with women's studies, and some schools that have similar programs actually even refer to it as, like, feminist studies. So I think actually that might be the closest to describing what Gender and Sexuality Studies is, but it's interdisciplinary, so it actually spans a lot of things. And yeah, so that's what I studied in college, and I spent a lot of time at that point, like, doing activism around things like reproductive justice, and you know, stuff like access to abortion and healthcare. Or I did a lot of volunteer work. I don't know if you ever were familiar with the program Alternative Breaks on campus.
I'm not.
It's like it's sort of like mission trips, and, you know, like I guess religious, you know, in churches and stuff, or like religious institutions. Except for you take the spiritual or religious part out and instead incorporate it with, like, reflection. I mean, if your reflection, you know, as an individual has a lot, is grounded in your spirituality, like, you know, there's space for that, but we go on these trips and do this volunteer work in different parts of some programs go all over the world, but we went to different parts of the country doing, you know, trips around topics like housing insecurity and homelessness, or food insecurity, or immigration, or all these different topics that are connected to social justice. And I guess I'm including all of this because, like, those are the experiences that I think really allowed me to see my place in what I'm doing today, right? I spent a lot of time doing volunteer work and activism and advocacy around all these other issues, which still are really important to me, and are really fulfilling, and I feel like are, you know, awesome to continue doing work in. But it took some time for me to realize, like, okay, I think actually maybe I can be using these skills and these experiences that I've gleaned from doing work in these other areas of social justice, and maybe really kind of turn back in towards my own community and try to use those skills for people who I know and love and see every day. And that's my fellow sex workers. I really could only go to UNLV because of a job that I got when I was like 19, working in a webcam studio, which we can go into like the details about what
We'll
that
touch
is.
on it. We'll touch on it.
Yeah. And that continued to help me, get through my college career. And I saw all the time, a lot of the injustices and discrimination and disadvantages that like the people who I loved and that I worked with and that I cared about and were a part of my community, I saw those things that they faced, and it clicked at some point that like, oh, I can use this for us too. Like I can use these skills that I've learned and share them with a community that I care about, and I think need some of the love and support that I can hopefully get.
And you've done a great job so far. Just following you, I mean, you've become a face of this movement.
Oh,
And,
well, thank you.
and yeah, it's like when you're in college, it's not just the educational; it's the building blocks towards your future. And a lot, especially at UNLV, where it's a giant commuter school, and in the backyard of the strip that's built off social networking with everybody. You're building all these different connections. You dove into the feminist movement and equality, and I took women's studies in college too. And
Oh, yeah?
the one thing I realized is once I start taking it is it's not literally just women's studies. It's more just like equality, and it involves race, gender, religion, cultures, and everything under the sun. And so it
Thank
is.
you for noting that. That's really important. That's a really important thing that gets missed so early on. Like so many people I think just don't even get a chance to be exposed to some of those ideas or get access to it, because like that part right there that you said just isn't made clear. And I think that's actually a part of why the department chose a name like Gender and Sexuality Studies. It's a little bit, some would say it's a little bit more inclusive in that way.
Exactly. And UNLV offers some out there kind of classes too. There's
A lot of wine club.
a lot of my friends are taking there's like human sexuality, and there was like a pole dancing class. And
oh yeah. I think I took both of those. I mean,
there's a lot of the UNLV or Vegas specific, I guess you could call them like human arts classes.
Yeah. Sex and dance and entertainment was a perfect example of that. I think that was a really interesting course. Wow, yeah, I love. That's such a good point. Yeah, that I forget sometimes is how grounded a lot of the coursework on that campus is actually in Vegas. I love that about
because it's such.
Now I love UNLV. Now I don't. I'll critique them all day. Like I'll be first in line to like call them out and like hold them accountable. But like ultimately, I love the people who are there, and I love the experiences that I took away from it.
Yeah, it's because this sexual nature of Vegas is what it was built on. When you're on the strip, the cocktail flavors elude, not even just sexual behavior, but just like how they're presented, and the guys who are spending all the money. That's the ultimate goal is sex, or to find a partner who can satisfy you in whatever emotional or physical needs that you need. And and marketing's all sexualized as well. Even not just the strip, but on TV, Super Bowl ads are very sexualized.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
go ahead.
As I say, sex is what attracts attention as well as large amounts of money.
And that's such a great and important point, especially I think in the sex worker rights movement, because when so many people know that to be true, right? Like when we have this like weird contrast of sex, like at once, simultaneously being this thing that like is used to generate wealth, to market whatever. I mean, everything from Vegas shows to like, you know, cheeseburgers to like, you know, everything, whatever, movies, y'all know. And at the same time, some of the people who, you know, like sex workers, then choose to use sex as a means for them to either take agency over their lives or at minimum, you know, pay their bills on that sort of individual level. Then, you know, our acceptance of sex and commerce, like, you know, together, happening at once, then that acceptance starts kind of peeling away and people start becoming less comfortable with it. Whereas, like you said, you know, Super Bowl commercials can exude a certain amount of sexuality in order to, you know, make money. But that's, you know, we don't apply the same amount of acceptance across the board there in terms of the relationship between sexuality and commerce and finance and all those things.
Yeah, it could be too, because maybe the laws surrounding it are a little outdated. I mean, with the rise of social media, especially, everyone's very into their image. And if you see, Instagram's literally 90% butt pictures. So I don't know what Instagram would do without butt pictures.
For real. Great point. That's so true. It's like,
so our generation's more accepting of it. And you even see like the domination of Pornhub, where they even have like their own philanthropy arm that donates into different movements that are not even just sexual movements and rights, but into like nature and climate change. And it shows that this wealth that's generated from sex can be used towards good things.
I love that. That's so true.
And it's not just people being greedy and just keeping all their money and hiding it in a box in their room and buying drugs and cars and whatever else the case is.
Right. That's true. There are a lot of stereotypes about the things that people use, the things that people do who are involved in the sex industry, the things that people use their money for who are involved in the sex industry. And that's definitely, like, destigmatizing is definitely a big part of the work that we do at Sex Worker Alliance of Nevada, or SWAN. And I personally think that, like, it's one of the most important parts of the work we do and of the sex worker rights movement, because there's a lot of hurdles that we need to get over in terms of policy and criminalization and all those, you know, really tangible things, tangible wins or losses or whatever, you know, the laws and so forth. But I'm a cultural shift worker, and I believe deeply that it might either be, you know, way harder or just entirely impossible to get those policies changed and those laws changed if the, you know, culture and the stigma around sex work and sex workers isn't changed first.
Yeah, it's about creating awareness, and it's, like I said, it goes two ways, because when you look in Nevada specifically, prostitution is legal in a small amount of counties. I think it's like 6 or 7 counties, but then like the larger counties, it isn't. But then, you know, like prostitution is one of the oldest jobs ever created. It predates millennia. And so, like, back then it was viewed as a normal way of life. And then at some point in industrialization, or maybe in the beginning of just creating large civilizations, maybe the governments decided that it wasn't safe, whatever the practices were, or they couldn't get their hands in the money on it, or whatever it is. But there was something that got lost between the last few centuries. And our generation is more accepting of it. Seems like the older ones are a little bit more like just hard on it. But it is about creating awareness, and it is about understanding what it is. And like I was saying earlier, with the rise of technology, you see even more sex worker type positions opening up. Like you said, your webcam, that didn't exist 10, 20 years ago.
That's a great point. Yeah, you actually just brought up so many so many awesome things that, like, I we could go in like 17 different directions about. I thought of this one Instagram account that I follow that I love when you were talking about like that transition in time, how society viewed sex work and sex workers, which has definitely changed. And I think about it all the time, all the reasons that it's changed. And it's not been one straight line either, you know, like depending on the place and the time and the, you know, all these different factors, like really affect what sex work looked like, you know, in any particular situation or era. But this one account I follow, I think it's just called Horrors of Yore. And it's like dedicated to, you know, it's sex worker history. It's so, I love that account because it's just another piece of the puzzle in terms of like destigmatizing sex work and understanding what sex work is and understanding its place in the world. When you can look at sex work and sex workers in this completely, you know, different and separated time from yourself. I love everything that you were just saying a moment ago. And then what was it that you said after too about like sex work online?
Yeah, it's changed. It changes over in time. You know, eventually, I think the next move in the sex work industry would probably some sort of virtual reality version of it. I feel like that's like that'd be the next industry as it goes. But before we go into that, I kind of just want to set the definition on what exactly is a sex worker before we dive into these different topics.
Yeah, so there are a few different definitions, but I guess, you know, off the top of my head, to give you one that we're usually working with, a sex worker is somebody who exchanges either sex, sexual services, sexual goods in exchange for money or sometimes gifts, or, you know, uses trade, like receives, you know, uses trade. And
there's like a medium of exchange in the middle.
Exactly.
It's not just monetarily.
Exactly. So like, I guess, the word that I was looking for was it doesn't necessarily have to be money or services. Sometimes it can be more intangible stuff. Sometimes it can, you know, runs the gamut. There's a spectrum of sex work, and that's what's really important to understand in the term sex work, because it's intentionally broad and it's intentionally an umbrella term. So a sex worker can be a porn performer. A sex worker can be a stripper. A sex worker can be a brothel worker. A sex worker can be what I think a lot of people tend to have the image in their head of when they think of when they first hear the word sex worker, at least, is like an outdoor provider, right? A street-based sex worker. We can call those, or I guess they also like to be referred to as full-service workers too.
Okay.
There's a lot of different ways that we can refer to them, and some full-service sex workers actually still use the term prostitute, but I guess I'll say it like this: it's very much so like a reclaimed term, and I think that we're at a point in the movement where it's most full-service sex workers would prefer that you refer to them as that versus using the word prostitute, which is something of a slur now. And same thing with, go ahead, please.
Especially like legally as well. Whenever there's some sort of court case going on, or like in the jails where they have these full-service workers, and they're always referred to as prostitutes, because that is like
you just hit on such a great and important point with the word prostitute, which is that it's very much so used as a word to oppress us, to oppress full-service workers and sex workers in general. You don't actually even have to have been a full-service worker to have that word used against you in a court of law and ultimately, you know, criminalize or incarcerate you. And that's a big reason for why the word prostitute isn't as used in the community, and that's similar to the word whore too, right? Whore is a much older word, and also is a word that is being reclaimed by the community, but otherwise, you know, if you don't yourself identify as a whore, not really a word that the community likes for you to be using, because of, you know, how it is still used against us and used to oppress us and so on. Did I hit most of the notes there?
Yeah. So basically, a sex worker, it's not someone who just eludes sexual, like physical contacts. It could be somebody who alludes to sexual behavior, as far as like it could be like like you said, stripper, maybe a burlesque dancer, go-go dancer, even is sexualized.
Actually, that's a good question. That's something that is a little bit contentious in the community, whether go-go dancers or burlesque dancers are considered sex workers. And another great point about timelines. Burlesque dancers, now most sex workers today don't actually really consider to be sex workers proper. They're sort of sex work adjacent, but for the most part, I think that most sex workers would say, no, that's not quite sex work. But interestingly, burlesque also used to be criminalized in this country. I mean, I think in the last century, like the burlesque clubs were the clubs that were getting shut down and having dancers arrested and deemed as completely societally like unacceptable. Whereas today, the way that you just said, even burlesque or go-go dancers is because of an idea that has changed around those professions, which is that, well, maybe burlesque is a little bit more like art than porn, or maybe go-go dancing is a little bit more like dancing than sex. And so it's up in the air, I get like across the community, there might be people who have different answers to whether or not like those particular professions count as sex workers. But to the broader point, yeah, like a sex worker, I mean, a cam model is considered a sex worker at this point. And there are lots of other, definitions of sex workers that don't just include like this one particular narrow idea that we have of what sex work is. And that's on purpose, right? This is a term that was coined, I mean, it was coined for a lot of reasons, but the way that I see it being really meaningful in terms, like, especially in its breadth and its, inclusivity, is that there is a solidarity then across the sex trade and sex industry and across, workers that is found in using a word like sex worker that might not be found in only, referring to like all sex workers as full service workers, or as if like the only workers that were sex workers were, outdoor providers. Because, right, when we can build that power and use that as an identifier and something that was also, comes from us, like sex work is a term that was coined by a sex worker, right? Like, so we can take this agency by using the word sex work in a way that other words like prostitute and whore and whatever else,
Yeah, so you guys
to describe us, we can't use it in the same way.
Yeah, so it sounds like you guys are trying, so it's like it was coined with a negative stigma as like a box, like all sex workers are full service workers, but you guys are trying to expand that and make it almost like a spectrum, like a political spectrum, where there's so many different varying opinions on it. And the sex worker spectrum is like, it could be anything that's literally physical sex. It could be something that's like emotionally related, like even escort worker or escort services could fall into that category.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Sex work at this point is an umbrella term. And now we have lots of different other words to describe, like, particular job duties and a place of, workplaces and that sort of thing. But sex work is anybody who, trades sexual services for money, basically, to hyper simplify it.
And what are like the most common type of people who are in sex workers? Is it as far as like the LGBTQ community? Is it mostly women? What kind of just makes up the whole landscape of it?
It would be really great if we had the kind of data that a lot of other professions have. But as I'm sure, you will see in this podcast, like it's a theme in the movement, in the sex worker rights movement, that we don't have access to funding or resources or studies in the same way that a lot of that a lot of other movements do. So I can't tell you, with science to back me up, what the demographics of sex workers look like. And I can share with you some, anecdotal answer, but the truth is that we don't know. We don't know for sure. And also, I guess I would say that there is a lot of diversity in sex workers. I would say that, like, there tend to be more femme folk, women and femme folk in sex work positions than we see men and masculine folk in. But we also don't know how much of that has to do with visibility and the way that being a sex worker as a woman looks differently than the way it does for a man. And like in terms of those realities, I mean, we definitely have a big representation of trans folk and non-binary people. That has to do with a lot of different things. I mean, sometimes the reality is that sometimes, because of how transphobic our society is, often sometimes we call the sex workforce a sanctuary workforce, because it has a way of accepting in folks who don't have other options.
Yeah, they don't have anywhere to go. They've kind of just been like, they've been outcasted by society because of the misunderstanding surrounding them.
Yeah. So, there's a thing about sex work, which is that it is this sort of entry level. It usually is the sort of entry level work that breeds a sort of real catch-all for all different types of people. So there's lots of trans folk, and there's lots of women. There's also lots of people of color. There's also lots of poor people. There's also lots of parents. I mean, I guess that's kind of a harder question to answer than I thought it would be at first, because we really do have all different types of people as sex workers, and that's, not to mention we don't have the data to tell us one way or the other.
Yeah, that makes sense, because it's not I mean, some of it's regulated, but the other half of it is unregulated because of the cast that's been put on by society, or not even just society, the government or the legal framework that surrounds it.
Both. For sure, both.
And so with, I guess you could say, in Vegas, we know that full service workers exist. Very familiar, especially with lots of money running around on the strip. You could say that the large amount, at least revenue generating portion of sex work, is fairly underground because of that. Yeah. And do you guys help them as well, as far as creating a sanctuary?
Yeah, absolutely. Part of why we actually decided to call ourselves the Sex Workers Alliance of Nevada was for that very reason. Like, we have a lot of strippers in our group, and that's for a variety of reasons. But at some point, there have been questions about if there should be, like a stripper specific, even, alliance, or maybe even, like a cam girl specific alliance, or a, full service only alliance. But part of the strength in the word sex work is that it's not safe to be out as a sex worker, in regardless of what kind of sex worker you are, for the most part. But there are some professions in sex work where it's more and less safe to be out as a sex worker. So you kind of touched on earlier how different it seems like, a cam performer might be to a full service provider, right? Okay, so that person isn't even engaging in physical contact with their clients. That's still considered sex work. There's a lot less stigma for some of the professions than there is for others. And beyond stigma, there's a lot less criminalization for certain, parts of the profession than there are for others. So part of what makes us strong as an alliance is that we are all, we use each other to hold each other up, despite the fact that we might not all have the same workplace. And there's a what's the word, like there's a safety net.
It's like a strength in numbers thing.
Yeah, it is like a strength in numbers and a strength in solidarity that, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is,
I could just say that, especially when it comes to sex, it is like a physical contact thing, but it is highly emotional as well, as far as like, you know, the promiscuousness or like how you allude to it. Men generally favor like the chase after sex than actually like the sexual act itself. And so there's a lot of emotions. And then as far as like love, that gets entangled into it.
So true. And almost any sex worker will tell you what the role that intimacy plays and the work that they do, and how little, we call them civilians, we call people who don't engage in sex work civilians, how little how little the civilians recognize, like, how much of the work that we do really is based on intimacy. And I guess the point that I was trying to get to is really that, like, we use the privileges that certain parts of the industry have in order to, like, hold up and lift up and protect those who don't have the same privileges, whether that's criminalization or, you know, all the other things like racism and classism and things that certain groups in the sex work industry have to face that, like, certain groups don't, which is a big part of why I'm vocal about the movement, because I have a lot of those privileges, right? Like I'm white presenting. I'm half white. I have the American citizenship. I have U.S. citizenship. I have, I have a college education. Like, there are a lot of privileges that I have that so many of the sex workers that I know and love and don't know and love don't have. And I just have way less to lose. So it's kind of a balancing act of, like, using my own visibility to hopefully change some attitudes about what people think sex work is, and who deserves to be respected, and, you know, who deserves to be heard, while also recognizing that, like, you know, people like me aren't the whole of sex workers. There are a lot of Black and brown and trans sex workers out there that, like, don't have the same, necessarily get access to the same platforms that people who look like me and act like me and talk like me and sound like me, all those things that they, you know, that we do get access to.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's kind of like the phrase that we use in the sports world, and they use it as well as team building. It's like, you're only as strong as your weakest link. And not saying that they're a weak link, but they're lacking regulatory favor. And so you guys are trying to pull them along and bring them into the light from the darkness that they have to hide in the current
and
state.
Hopefully do a little bit more of a passing of the mic than speaking for them too. And that's what we think solidarity is listening to what people who are at the center of an issue look like, because there's a lot of issues to tackle in sex work, but, like, I think most of us would agree that, like, criminalization and, like, violence are really urgent needs that need to be addressed in a timely fashion, you know.
Are those the toughest challenges that sex workers specifically face, is getting through to the legalization and just the physical abuse that goes on? And since it is illegal, or at least a full service, that they don't have any protections of themselves.
Yeah, I would say that right now the sex worker rights movement is very much focused on decriminalization, and this is a great opportunity to talk about some of the differences between legalization and decriminalization. So, like you said, Nevada is very unique in that it's the only state in the union that has a legalized system of sex work where brothels can operate in, whatever it is, 6 or 7 of the counties. I think it's any county that has, with a population of under 700,000 people.
Okay.
So, that's right there, the misconception. I'm not sure how many of your viewers or listeners are, in or outside of Nevada, but that's a misconception that a lot of people have about Vegas. That everybody thinks that prostitution is legal in Vegas, when actually in Clark County, which, Las Vegas is in, is not legal. So there's definitely a lot of people who come here,
for it. Yeah,
every year.
There's so much opportunity on this strip. It makes you wonder why why that rule is in place. Maybe it's because it's to bring people to the other counties, or I don't know, maybe it was set depending on when the rule was created. I'm assuming that was probably created in the 40s or 50s or 60s, in the beginning Vegas days, because there's only one city or two cities in Nevada that are over 700,000 people.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I know some of the reasons now why it continues, like what you just said about like giving folks a reason to come out to those like rural counties that may not otherwise leave. I know that that's absolutely a part of the reason why it's continued to be that way. But yeah, I am such a nerd about learning about like Nevada history, in particular like sex work history in Nevada, and I would love to learn more about that. I'm more familiar with some of the laws that are currently on the books around like strip clubs in Vegas, but yeah, it's a great question, and it has definitely resulted in a lot of people being arrested.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, yeah, the idea that sex work, full service sex work is legal in Vegas, when really it isn't.
It's crazy that there's those subtle differences where it's like you can go 50 miles down the road and find a full service worker legalized, as well as like the relation to, you could go a few miles down the street to a licensed porn company who is performing full services in front of a camera legally. So it's like literally that there's miles in between these like subtle differences, which is just like just a legality behind it.
There's this professor who I like have so much admiration for at UNLV, who actually taught, I think, my first Gender and Sexuality Studies class, the class that like really first made me like, oh, maybe this should be my major. I switched majors, actually. It wasn't always my major. And her name is Lynn Camella, and she's written a couple of books. Her most recent one is called Vibrator Nation, and it's about like how the relationship between the feminist movement and sex toy shops and like sex education and that sort of thing. But she also oh man, shoot, what were we just talking about? Sorry, I totally lost focus. What was the reason I wanted to
we're just talking about like those subtle differences.
Yeah, thank you. And she taught a class in my last semester at UNLV, which was about like race, sex, and obscenity and censorship in America over the last, like, I think just like since ever, right? But at least the last like 100 or so years. And it was, oh man, that class changed everything for me in terms of learning about that very question, like what counts as, and this is what it gets down to if you want to get really down with the fun stuff in terms of the the theory and the thinking, is like what counts as free speech really, and and what counts as this thing called obscenity, on the law books, and what what are the consequences for people who test those limits and test those lines, and how has that changed over time, which goes back to what we were talking about a minute ago in terms of like burlesque performers being criminalized. I mean, you can go almost anywhere in the country now and see a burlesque performance. I mean, maybe not now.
Yeah, it's obscenity by definition is subjective, because what's obscene in one county might be totally okay in another. Like Vegas is literally the perfect example. The strip was seen as like the devil's work and obscene for decades. Like gambling, for instance, was only allowed in Vegas for decades.
One of my favorites is do you know about how the only strip club in Vegas that is fully nude and serves alcohol is the Palomino.
Really? I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
it's the only one that's legally allowed to both be totally nude and also serve alcohol, because every other club has to either be topless and serve alcohol, or it can be nude but dry bar, no alcohol served. So that
It makes you wonder how they got into that situation. Yeah.
Sorry, what did you say?
It makes you wonder how they got into that situation.
That I actually do know. That's the
Do
part.
you?
That's the part of the nerd sex work, Nevada, Las Vegas history that I am familiar with. That I did a project on, and it was for that class, and it goes right into this question about subjectivity and obscenity. It was so interesting to learn about. We would have also had things like distance requirements, which I think it still exists in some cities in the country, where if you enter a strip club and want to patronize the services of the dancers there, you have to maintain a certain amount of distance. There's a minimum distance requirement that you have to.
Wow, they're practicing safe physical distancing by law for decades.
For real, yeah. I mean, exactly, the social distancing. There was, before the clubs got shut down and some of them were still open, there was a meme going around in the stripper community of, I'm a stripper. If I didn't say that already, that's what I've been doing for the last almost 2 years after I transitioned out of webcamming work. So there was a meme going around in the stripper community about how it was like a harm reduction meme about how to continue to strip safely, as safe as possible. And that was actually one of the points that they made, Vegas strippers made in response to this meme, which was saying, you really need to be doing the contactless dances, which is what they call them, when you have that distance requirement. Or sometimes there's no distance requirement, it's just no touching. You can be like right up next to each other, but not touching. And the response that the Vegas strippers had was, that's not, this is great. And there were lots of, helpful things about like really cleaning the pole and all these different tactics that you can use to keep yourself safe. But, maintaining a social distance isn't realistic in the Vegas clubs, or at least, it wasn't at that time. I don't know what the pandemic is going to do, for the reality of sex workers and strippers in the future, but we don't have that distance requirement. And I'll tell you exactly why. Because the lawyers who were defending the strip clubs, which, clearly saw something like a distance requirement as being potentially negative or
catastrophic to the business.
Yeah, right. There's this relationship between the money making and the
100%.
Yeah, and the actions and the physical actions that their patrons and the sex workers could be taking. So the argument that they used was about free speech, and said that because it's a strip club and because they're dancers and because we are dancers, because it's a dance performance that we're providing, that the distance between the dancer and the guest communicates a message in the performance.
Wow.
Right? Wow, right?
Yeah.
That because it communicates a message, it can't be it can't be regulated, or what's the word that they use? It's escaping me in terms of like the legalese that they use, but that basically they said that because that distance communicates a message in the art, that you can't infringe upon those free speech rights, because that's essentially like censoring, I don't know, something that is easier to conceptualize.
Yeah,
like,
they're taking the literal term of body language.
Exactly. Yeah, which I mean, I was like, damn, that's true, right? Like I think that they were right, and it's really interesting how, that like, just like you said, like that word obscenity is interpreted in so many different ways across the country, and even within county to county, for instance, here.
Mm-hmm.
that was a little bit of my rant and nerd out on.
No, that's the nature, especially in Nevada. It's just the different counties have the different obscenities in their view based off the different religious beliefs or the different political positions that these people are in. And
I guess the thing that I can say to kind of bring it maybe to something that is a little bit like more personal or easy to conceptualize, like, I guess I'll just like share my personal like experience and thought process with that, which was like entering into the strip club scene and becoming a dancer. That was always something that I wondered, you know, like where did some of these rules come from, right? Like, so why is it that my friends who work at the Palomino, you know, can be full nude and have this alcoholic? There are things that you kind of do in your head to make up, like reasons that you make up for why certain things exist, you know.
Humans will rationalize anything they have based off their opinions.
Yeah, exactly, precisely. So I would think things like, it's like funny to even say out loud now, but I would say things like, well, you know, it's probably for our own safety, you know, that like somehow the act of being topless, you know, but still having underwear on, that is, you know, while the clients are drinking, like that is going to be like safer for us, and that's why the rules are in place. And then you think like, well, are the people at the Palomino like different than the people who enter the club and, you know, whatever other, you know, club you're working at in town? And it allows you to think about, well, maybe some of these rules are bullshit, you know, like maybe some of these ideas we have about what's right and wrong and what's safe and not, maybe they aren't as certain as we think they are. And that's what I really like to think about in this whole topic, is like unlearning and unpacking some of the ideas and stereotypes that, you know, I had myself, you know, before I entered and after I entered the sex work profession. You know, I still am doing the work to destigmatize sex workers and myself and unlearn all of this stuff that we're taught, you know, in the mainstream culture about sex workers and who we are and what they do and what their role is in society and what they're deserving of and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think especially our generation, we're focused on unlearning a lot, not even just in the sex industry. Like this pandemic's made a lot of people realize that those business meetings maybe don't have to be in person, or maybe education at the college level isn't needed to succeed. And all these different things that, especially with the younger generations, is that what is reality may not be what's exactly right. And so like just going to the Palomino thing, it's like, or in your case, it's like, is that piece of fabric really protecting you? Is that really like this one piece of fabric is really gonna stop, I guess, whatever violent behavior may happen
exactly
on behalf of that person?
Exactly. You know, like it was, you know, I think of it as being kind of silly now to have even believed that, but like it has to do with so many different I think like judgments that we have on both men and women. And I think that what is interesting, I think, about sex work and talking about sex work for people, whether they're sex workers or whether they're civilians, is a lot of those ideas really come to a head, you know, in sex work, right?
Yeah, they clash.
Yeah, like whether it's dancing or whether it's camming or whether it's, you know, a dominatrix, like the notes that you were just mentioning earlier about how much of a role things like, you know, emotional intimacy play in sex work, those are moments that come up and often really contradict ideas that we have about masculinity and femininity and different roles that we have in society. So I at least that's why I like to think about it, and I think it's part of what gets people a little fired up and riled up.
100%. It's a spectrum, just as like the political or religious spectrums. Is that it's not just one distinct way, 10 distinct ways. There's infinite amount of distinct beliefs behind it.
Please go ahead.
And just like regarding like sex work, and just the ideas behind it were built upon centuries of masculinity, where the man had to go out and protect the woman. And so those are kind of what set the original standards. But now with technology evolving and the more accepting of the LGBT community and different, how like women are normalizing into society as far as like works and careers and different political positions.
So more power in certain parts of the society and in the world, and not in others.
everything becomes more blended together at the end of the day. And so that comes back to your guys' movement, is you're trying to blend everything in the sex work and provide a sanctuary. And so then that brings me to what do you think would be the benefits if everything in the sex work became on the same spectrum as far as legalization? What would the benefits?
If we were decriminalized?
Yeah.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind in answering that question is the things that are happening right now, right? So like trans workers trans people in New York right now, and I mean, I'm not sure how much this is happening. We'll find out as the weeks and months go on in terms of what, the pandemic, how the pandemic has affected this. But it is a practice in New York where trans workers who are stopped by the police can have condoms that are on their person, that are being held on them, used against them in court and in arrest.
Really?
As proof for soliciting prostitution.
It's like having drug bags and weed on you at the same time, but with condoms. It's interesting.
Yeah. What do you mean? Like
if somebody's walking around with, let's say, like a gram of weed in a state that's not legal, and you have like 2 or 3 bags on you, they consider you a drug dealer. Even if you may not be, maybe you just have 2 extra bags on you.
Or people who have like more than one pill on them or something.
Yeah, and people carry around condoms in general. And since earlier saying like a lot of trans people go into the sex industry, maybe they're not on the way to like some sort of sexual transaction or full service.
Just like any other person.
They're just going to the store.
Has a condom on.
Yeah, they're just going to the store.
The reasons that you would have a condom on you, like that is an example of something that, of a way that like there's these intersections of being a trans person, a person of color, a poor person, who's a pedestrian in ways that like wealthy people aren't. There are all these things going on there. And the state uses the vehicle of the criminalization of sex work, of prostitution, in order to punish that person. So in a world where we're decriminalized, this is also a little bit of the crux of it too, is that we hope that, or what we want is for something like that to not to be able to happen. We don't want people to go to prison for having condoms on them.
It's not fair.
Or being trans. They call it the walking while trans, law or bills. I'm not super in depth with the advocacy in New York, but we try to all stay connected and up to date with everything that's going on. But ultimately, even if we decriminalize sex work, police tend to find a way to criminalize poor folk and decriminalize Black folk and decriminalize trans folk. So it's like a twofold, and that's why it's not just about decriminalization, but some other things that would change. I mean, there are parents who lose custody battles and lose access to custody of their children because of the criminalization of sex work. There are people who don't have a U.S. citizenship who, if they have a charge on their record of soliciting, because they can't legally work in any other sector, or maybe because they want to, maybe because they see the potential like opportunities for them in sex work. There's a lot of different reasons that people go into sex work, and maybe later we can talk about the 3 C's. But for whatever reason, they've got this charge now on their record, and maybe can't even become a U.S. citizen in the way that they would have been able, that they would have otherwise been able to, if they didn't have, nonviolent, we call it a victimless crime, on their record. So we want to see people who oftentimes already have have the cards stacked against them. We want to see a little bit, I mean, if what we can do is peel off that layer and see a little bit less criminalization of those people, see a little bit less oppression of those people who already have all these other, other forces working against them, then that would be, one of the hopes of decriminalizing sex work, that some of the, consequences of getting a charge like that, or being incarcerated, going to prison in and of itself. We hope that people won't have to face those same kinds of oppression if we decriminalize sex work.
Yeah, it's like once people get into the jail system, it becomes like a cascading effect of bad things that happen. And you see it happen time and time again, whether it's through a Netflix documentary or somebody that they usually end up back in there just because of some small case.
And yeah, we have this idea that if people are in prison, they deserve it somehow, when so often it'll be something like, I don't know, being messing up a probation period, or
being out past curfew or something.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was about to say. Something where the timing is wrong on something, you haven't even necessarily committed a crime again, but because you broke parole, you get back into the system, and yeah, it's definitely a real cyclical, dangerous situation. And again, when we're talking about trans folks, what prison looks like for trans folks is just this additional level of scary, dangerous, violent, and what we don't want to see our sex work siblings have to go through anymore.
Yeah, that's bad. And it's just decriminalization is just the first step. When you go back to the abolishment of slavery, you still saw systemic hate in the South for almost a century thereafter. So
yeah, it's to this day,
it's only the first step.
Feeling those effects. Yeah, absolutely. The decriminalization is one piece of the puzzle, one step in the movement, and it's not the end all be all. I think there's been a little bit of criticism of the sex workers' rights movement for actually, making it seem like decrim is the end all be all of the movement, when it's not. There are so many other pieces of the puzzle, and like I said earlier, destigmatization for me is something that I feel really energized by and feels so much more tangible, because decriminalization isn't something that most people feel is really accessible to them. Decriminalization doesn't feel like something that you can do just sitting on your couch at home. But I think that destigmatization is, right? We can change attitudes. You don't have to be an expert to change an attitude. You just have to have an open enough mind, and you just have to have enough, if you have the courage to talk about it with somebody you love, or your friend, when they, make a joke maybe, or a mean comment, or there are so many dead stripper jokes, or
there is. It still happens time and time
again.
again.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, or in movies, you see it all the time. The way that people talk about sex workers is honestly it's I challenge you and any other person listening or watching to, if nothing else, try that. Try to become aware of the way that people talk about sex workers, prostitutes, strippers, cam girls. Just you don't need to even analyze it yet if you don't want to, or don't feel ready to, or whatever, but just take stock. Just start paying attention to the way that our society talks about sex workers, and maybe wonder to yourself, what other groups is it acceptable to talk about people like that in that way? Why is it acceptable to talk about sex workers that way? Why is a whore, almost the worst thing that a woman can be sometimes? Why is a hoe, why is that a derogatory slur? Just having an open mind to ask some of those questions, and consider some of those some of those, reconsider some of those narratives, like that right there is something that we all can do, and it makes such a huge impact, even if it might not be decriminalization.
Yeah, even in time like today, just a small movement. You see more and more social movements happening nowadays because of the huge influence of social media. Just when you go back and watch movies from the early 2000s and you see anything that has to do with like sexualization in the workplace, is like just rampant through all the movies. And then the Me Too movement started, people started speaking up, and now it's not at all okay. And when you look back and watch these movies, you almost cringe, and you're like, oh my god,
yeah,
this is like,
you have a cringe. I'm so happy you brought up the social media, the role that social media plays, because that is, I think it also kind of goes hand in hand with the work that SWAN does. Like we
yeah, let's get into SWAN. I want to know more about it now.
Get into it. Yeah. I'm so happy to talk about it. I'm really so, I'm so proud, and I feel so like energized by this organization and like this movement, I just couldn't be more proud of the work that we do and who's in this group. So I'm just gonna read you the SWAN's mission statement, if that's okay. So SWAN is a community-led movement creating sanctuary spaces which support, validate, and celebrate Nevada sex workers. I know I talk real fast.
It's powerful.
Thank you.
Because when you just even the term sanctuary, it shows that it's not safe outside of the sanctuary. And so it just makes you think, just through the conversation that we've had over the last hour, that's been all these different mechanisms in society that oppress sex workers and aggression led towards it. So you're trying to build this safe haven towards the different spectrum of sex workers. And when did you found, or I guess co-create SWAN? Like, how old is this movement?
That's a good question, because we SWAN itself has been established for a year now, and we came out of another close by organization, the Las Vegas Sex Workers Collective, which still exists and serves different purposes. I mean, I'm of the belief that the more resources that we have for sex workers in the area and the region, the better. And so SWAN was it grew out of the Las Vegas Sex Worker Collective, and we still have allies there that are in the collective that we work in solidarity with, because ultimately we have so many of the same goals that are aligned. A lot of the sex worker organizing today very much so was, I wouldn't say born out of, but was really strengthened and has a lot of our foundation in response to a law that was passed in, I think it was 2017, maybe 2018. I think it was 2017, but it's called FOSTA SESTA.
What was that? Was it?
What is it called? It's called FOSTA/SESTA. So those are just the House and Senate versions of the same bill. And SESTA stands for Stop Enabling Sex Trafficking Act, which goes, I mean, this is a whole other separate rabbit hole worth an entire other podcast episode or fucking podcast series about the use of the word, the use of the term sex trafficking and the purposes that phrase serves. But the reality is that the passage of the law, FOSTA SESTA, and the effects that it had on the sex worker community have been it wouldn't be an overstatement to say that it's been deadly. If you're familiar with the website Backpage, it was a website that was widely used by full service workers to put ads up so that they could safely screen their clients in a way that just didn't exist before the internet, and certainly and Backpage in particular. There's this there's an extra level of safety and security that you get to that gets to be used when you can screen your clients online. But FOSTA SESTA essentially shut that page down. And that was a huge moment in the sex worker rights movement in the US, which in a lot of ways is actually way less progressed than many other nations. Interestingly enough, I think some people have certain ideas about this country, and they don't always match up with reality. But a lot of the sex worker organizing that exists today and has persisted since that time was very much in response to the passage of that law. So I'm connecting SWAN's establishment to that moment and, you know, the sex worker rights movement history in this country, because it was very much a straw on the camel's back sort of situation, like the last straw for a lot of us, to see a bill passed with the language of stopping sex trafficking and under the guise of sex trafficking, but not necessarily, you know, actually doing any of those things. And we believe really doing more of an opposite kind of situation, where the passage of that bill put so many sex workers at a much greater risk of harm, and that includes sex trafficking survivors too.
I didn't even think about that. You'd think that it's good, but the sex trafficking, when people think that you're stopping sex trafficking, everyone's like, oh, that's good.
Yep.
But
It really is.
it's taking that level of security away from you guys. So you created this to help band everyone together, and it's a strength in numbers.
Yeah, we said that's enough. That's enough of that. Stop harming us. Stop trying to erase us. Stop killing us. And yeah, we very much grew in response to that. And then also lots of the other, you know, it was kind of like an opportunity for us to say, like, you know, we've all been dealing with all this shit in silos. Part of here, and let me get actually to one of the things that excites me most about SWAN and things, you know, I was thinking about when you mentioned social media earlier, which is that sex workers don't have safe places to be, period. But we also don't have spaces to talk to, we often don't have spaces to talk to other sex workers about our work and about, you know, about our lives, about what happens when we do our work, about the risks that we take on, about the good things that happen, about anything. And that's for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes it's something like you literally just don't see many of your colleagues. You know, if you are a webcam model that works from home, like you don't see other sex workers regularly. Sometimes it's because of the structures that workplace management has in place to intentionally make it difficult for workers to connect or organize, for that matter, you know, in terms of for their labor rights. In fact, for those sex workers who do work in like legalized or regulated workplaces, most of us are independent contractors, and there are laws against independent contractors organizing, or even I think that there are some places where you can't even, like, whether you're organizing for your labor rights or not, like, you know, you just can't coalesce to talk about work at all. Like,
yeah, and they do that purposely, so you don't have worker protection from them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a very intentional disempowerment of us. And what SWAN, one of the things that SWAN does to respond to that is, like I mentioned in our mission statement, we create sanctuary spaces that open up a possibility to talk about so many different things. I mean, we talk about the workplace, you know, violence and harassment and issues and risks that we take on, but you know what? Sometimes we also talk about how to better our game, how to increase our income, how to, you know, like tips and tricks of the trade. And sometimes this is one of the things that I think that civilians really just can't understand, unless they, like hear and know about it, is that like sex workers don't have the same space to complain about their work that most other workers do, right? There's a great quote from the book Playing the Whore by Melissa Gira Grant. And a quote from the book says like this idea, which is when I was working as a waitress in the restaurant industry, and getting harassed daily by the clients and guests at that job, nobody ever told me like, well, maybe you should get out of the restaurant industry. Like when sex workers try to ever voice any kind of complaints or issues that go on in the job, the response is usually something like, well, that's because you're a stripper, or that, why don't you leave altogether then? Why do you even stay? Why do you stay in the work? And sometimes part of what making a sanctuary space is about, it's just about making space for us to vent and complain about work without somebody entirely invalidating what your job is. Like having people to listen to you and to exchange with and say, yeah, that sucks. Like that sucks. That's happened to me. Oh, I hate when they do that. And not without all of the, judgment or misunderstanding or, all of the things that come with trying to talk to people who are outside of the sex industry about it. So those sanctuary spaces serve as, sometimes they serve as like real protection, right? Like when we have members of SWAN come to us with, having experienced like real violence at work, it can be about coalescing together and addressing the harm and responding to harm and getting that person to resources. But sometimes it can just be about getting together and having a safe place to complain about your job.
Yeah, it's just the emotional support surrounding sex is a big part. It's not like most of the places on the strip, if you're like a bartender, the server, where you can just complain to your stories about work to your friends, because it's just like basic information. But once you start talking about sex and you say it to the wrong person who may be on the opposite side of the religious or political spectrum, it could result in a lot of backlash, whether they want to tell on you, maybe you said something in confidence towards them and they want to turn it around and just like
that's a great point. It's literally not safe to do it most of the time. Like forget having somebody to relate to you. Like that might result in you getting your kids taken away from you, or your vanilla job, which is another way that we refer to jobs that is outside work that's outside of the sex trade. I spent most of my sex work career not living out, which is another term we borrow from the queer community to describe whether or not we are open about the sex work that we do. I spent most of my sex worker career not living out for fear of one of my vanilla jobs, someone out of one of my vanilla jobs, which I also held down the entire time that I was doing sex work. I was scared that somebody would find out and I would lose my job over it. That's like something that happens all the time. Like you can't, so it's everything from, like not having somebody to relate to, or as you mentioned, you don't know what that person's gonna use against you if you do choose to say something. It simply is not safe to be out, and that's what we try to, that's what one of the things that we try to provide with SWAN is you can, like, we understand and accept you, right? Like we try to say to sex workers that we want you, we love you, we welcome you, we see you, like, you have us. We're not going to judge you for the work that you do to support yourself or your family. We're definitely not going to judge you for that. And also we're going to lift you up as best that we can. As best that we can to hold you up in a world that tries to hold you down most of the time. And that's a big part of what the talent show the other day was about. Like, how can we come together for ourselves and respond to the crisis in a way that the state and government just does not do for us. We have never, we have always been, what's the word? We've always been, the state has always oppressed us. We have always been that's the word, discriminated against by the state and by government and by law enforcement. So we know that often all we have is each other to get us through times like these times of crisis.
Yeah, I like that, and I like the atmosphere of that talent show yesterday. It was just nothing but positive comments. It was uplifting. Like I was saying before this too. At one point I saw like 130 people in there.
Yeah, I was really pleased with the chat box too, like of seeing all of the all of the positive. Oh man, everybody was just like gassing each other up. Like they were all so stoked to see. Oh, it was definitely super heartwarming, just like, especially it being one of our first, virtual, like post-pandemic events, that like we were still able to at least hold some of that energy of love and acceptance and strength, even online.
Yeah, and the friends, I was watching it with two of the friends that I was with, and they were just saying, the woman that I was with was saying that she couldn't stop smiling because you just were so happy while you were emceeing it, and like she could feel that like resemblance of how happy you were through that.
Wow, that's so sweet. Thank you for telling me that. I'm so happy to hear that.
It was powerful. And so can you talk about your guys' march last year that made the news? I was unaware of SWANevada until I was like, oh, Jazz on the news. So then I started looking into it more. What inspired that movement, and what was the purpose of that?
So, great question. The march last year, that was actually technically like the second year that we had done the march, but it was definitely bigger that year than the year prior. And the march is in honor and celebration of International Horse Day. Some people do refer to it as International Sex Workers Day, but I think the part of the point of saying International Horse Day is the pejorative nature of it, right?
You're taking the power back of the word.
Exactly, absolutely, reclaiming for in that sense. And International Horse Day is a day that started in France. I think it was in the 1970s. If I'm not wrong, I should have double checked that before we had our conversation. But it was a similar situation in that it was a demonstration to respond to the working conditions of full service sex workers in France. They held a demonstration at a church in their town, and I can't even remember the city. I'm such a bad sex work history nerd, but it's totally Googleable. Anybody who's
it's okay if it relates to Nevada, you got it down. Outside of that, we got Google.
But the point is that it's a day of solidarity internationally. Like, and when I say internationally, I'm talking for real internationally. Like, we have like movements across the globe celebrate and respond on International Horse Day. It's for visibility, it's for solidarity, it's for strength of the movement, and in response to the working conditions of workers across the world. And March last year, we decided to have the purpose and messaging around it be about it was pride, awareness, and solidarity. And the pride part, I think, is part of what got so much. I mean, there were lots of reasons why we got so much of a response, but something that I guess I was just really energized by and inspired by was finally an opportunity to let sex workers just be proud, right? Like, there's so much justifying and shame, and explaining and just negativity that we have to do just to fucking exist, right? Like just to pay our bills like anybody else does. That part of what was so powerful about that march was the opportunity to challenge that narrative and to let people be proud of the fact that they do what they do. And it's a hard line to walk sometimes, because there's this happy hooker narrative that says that like the idea is that the only, you can only, that sex work is only valid if you're really, stoked about doing it. Like you have to feel empowered in order to be, for sex work to be okay, or for it to be legitimate, or for it to be valid or legal or safe. When that's just really not a standard that almost any other job or profession is held to. Like when when the fucking McDonald's worker or the Walmart worker enters their workplace, like they don't have to answer the question, do I feel empowered by walking into my job right now? Like
Yeah, people have bad days at work, and you don't have to fully live your job. A lot of people use the strip as just a job and means to catapult themselves into a different career that they want later in life.
Exactly.
It could just be a stepping stone, and it doesn't have to be your passion.
Exactly. So it's tough. We don't want to tiptoe too far into that narrative of like, I'm a hooker and I'm so happy about it, and like these are all I love it, and blah blah blah, because then it's unfair, and you touched on all those reasons to understand why. So it's tricky, it's nuanced, but it was also really magical, to hear people talk about things that you don't hear people talk about when it comes to sex work. You don't hear people talk about the healing work that sex workers do. You don't hear people talk about the life-changing betterment that can come sometimes from sex work, right? Like we do hear a lot of the narrative about the tough stuff, the shitty stuff, the violence, like, and those deserve space too. But part of, I think, what was so pejorative about that march was that pride piece. Is like, wait a minute, you're a whore and you're proud of it? Like what is this? What do they have to say? What does this group have to say? What's that about? And there's lots more about the march I can answer if you like, but that's kind of a little.
Yeah, it was captivating when I saw it on the news. As you spoke, and I believe there was one other person that had a cameo as well, and just talking.
Yeah, there were a few different interviews around.
Everyone looked excited. Looked like there was a lot of people there, and like I said, I was actually unaware of the movement until I saw it. So I was like, oh crap.
Yeah, and actually to ground it a little bit in terms of Vegas and your podcast, like I think I know that that's definitely a part of what makes Vegas so special. Like you saw the turnout, right? I mean, so that's only like the second year we did it. Had a pretty decent show out. I mean, like there was definitely a few hundred people who show up. And I mean, a group of us in SWAN, a few months after that march last year, we went to this like conference, this national conference, one of the very few that centered sex worker activism and sex worker rights in the movement. And it was really illuminating and enlightening. It was so incredible to be able to connect with all of these different, but connected groups across the country who were doing really similar work to us, and maybe in a different location or maybe with like a slightly different, direction, whatever, but we all are, in this common goal. And it was really a reminder of how unique Vegas is. I mean, I remember hearing a group talk about how, it was somewhere on the East Coast, I can't remember, talk about how they couldn't even get their local ACLU to work in allyship with them.
Wow.
Yeah, when our experience here, was that like, as far as the progressive, community goes, as far as the progressive nonprofit community goes, like, I mean, they're like, they ask us, they steady asking us, how can we support you? Like they show up for us in just such meaningful ways that like, it was a real shock and reminder and kind of reality check that like Vegas is a special place, and not everywhere is as I won't even say as open-minded, but like as willing to listen to us as Vegas. Like the support that we continue to get for SWAN and for the movement and for sex workers is like
it's amazing to see, just because the strip, like we were saying in the beginning, is very sexual dominated. And so ultimately you guys have the power, because what would the strip be without all of the cocktail servers, the strippers, the bottle girls, everything in between? The strip would literally fall apart without you guys.
Thank you for saying that. That's definitely one of the like campaigns that we hope to kind of really communicate to the Vegas community and to the world, that like, you know, we need to be honoring sex workers for what they do and who they are and what they provide. Yes, we are an economic cornerstone of this city and this community, and have been since it was
since the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. So from jump. So that's one of the things for sure that we hope that SWAN can contribute to, right? Is like the changing of the narrative around who sex workers are and like how they show up for the community. And I think that Vegas is definitely a really ripe ground for that. You know, I think that we're special in that way.
So do you think, after saying all that, do you think that Vegas could be a focal point for the sex workers movement as far as becoming a face, or because it is a city with a lot of money and it is considered the entertainment capital of the world? And if you guys become a number in powers, it could be like a very powerful movement.
I think in some ways we already are, especially just because of that unique position Nevada has, being one of the only state that has a legalized sex work model. I mean, we struggle a little bit with that, because those who are, you know, in the sex worker rights movement, most of us don't believe that the legalization model that we have in place right now actually is the best that we could do, or what we should be doing. So it's kind of it's a little bit of a weird position that we're in, but it definitely is like it definitely is a special position. And I think you're right, like all the things that you just said about Vegas and the image that we have, I think it lends itself towards a sort of spotlight, if you will.
Yeah, you guys are definitely in a good position. And what, I guess you'd say, once the pandemic's over, are there any upcoming goals or events that SWAN has planned, or what is the next few moves?
So, well, I guess, okay, first I'll answer that in like at least two ways. First way is that like we still are going to be celebrating and commemorating International Horse Day this year. We're just not going to be doing a march. Because of course, you know, we want to stay safe. That's one of our values, is safety. And that's on June 2nd. So everybody who's, you know, watching or listening is welcome to tune in and see what we have in store for folks virtually. So that's coming up, and will, you know, still probably be in the pandemic. But the other way I want to answer that question is just reading our vision statement too. So here it is. It says, SWAN envisions a world where sex workers have total power over their lives and thrive with the support, respect, and solidarity of their communities. So I would be lying if I said that we had some sort of plan for knowing what it looks like once the pandemic is over. But also, you know, the thing that I love about sex workers is how damn resilient we are, and in this weird way I have like a sense of trust in sex workers and their ability to problem solve, you know, even more so than than some other groups of people that I know, and I think we're so adaptable, as is SWAN, that we'll figure it out. You know, we're gonna figure out how we respond to this crisis, and we already are. You know,
yeah, yesterday's a prime example of adapting to whatever circumstances are thrown at you guys.
Thank you. Yeah, I think so, for sure. Right, we've been talking about doing a rent party for a while, and it was cool that we had that sort of on deck in the queue, or you know, toolbox, or like, you know, web of ideas that we could translate into, you know, a pandemic friendly event. And yeah, we're going to be able to make a meaningful impact in the lives of a few sex workers in Nevada because of that rent party. So, you know, we don't always have to work within the confines of what we think the world should look like. And that's, I think, what sex workers know deeply.
There's no doubt that you guys will innovate. I mean, the strip club was going to do drive-through dances. So
yeah, they're doing that in Oregon, I think it is, or yeah, Portland. Yeah. They already have the drive-through strip clubs. I encourage you all to Google the pictures of that. It's like pretty trippy. And
yeah,
like,
there's all kinds of different things you could do. I don't remember what state or city this was in, but one of the strip clubs was doing something called Boober Eats. It was like topless, like food delivery. It is great. It's a great cliche term, but
yeah. No, I mean, I don't know if Little Darlings actually went through with it, but they had been talking about doing the drive-through strip club situation. I want to check in on that now, actually, now that we're talking about it, and some of the dust has settled with all this.
There's no doubt in my mind for you guys, and I'm so glad to see where you guys go forward. And we've been going at this now for, what's it been, almost an hour and a half, or
right.
almost 2 hours. So
yeah, I'm kind of like never-endingly like into talking about this stuff.
No, there's 100% you will be back on the show later down the road, because this is a movement that's going to take time, lots of time. And
it's not a movement that we started, like this. It's been taking time, right? We're just only the most recent iteration of it, and I'm grateful, to people like you who are helping aid in that. What you were talking about as being innovation, like sharing these ideas in new ways that people can get access to it, and hopefully, join us, join our forces.
Strength in numbers. Strength in numbers.
Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing me on and listening and seeing you, Jake.
Of course. I just got one question before we go, and then I'm gonna ask, and then after that I'll ask how to get involved in SWAN. But just what does Las Vegas mean to you as a person? Yeah, it's the one exit question I give to everyone, just because this is based out of Vegas, and everyone has a different perception. Some people, Vegas is their second home, or they consider it home, even though they don't live in Vegas. Like I saw some people who are doing podcasts about Vegas, they don't even live in Vegas. So it shows there's a lot of passion there, and people come here for all kinds of different reasons.
Yeah, I agree. It's a really it's definitely not like a what's that word, monolithic kind of place. Like it does mean a lot of different things to different people. But what Vegas means to me, honestly, the first thing that came to mind is that it's, okay, I say this with a little bit of apprehension, but I believe that in a lot of ways Vegas is a land of opportunity. I think that that's not just true for sex workers at all, but I think a lot of different people come from so many different backgrounds. They come from so many different backgrounds to Vegas for a chance to live and thrive in a city in ways that have become less and less possible in other cities in the country, and have become less and less accessible in the bigger metropolises, places like whatever, Seattle, LA, New York. So Vegas feels like maybe one of the closest things that like still has an echo or a taste of that that trope about America being, or the US being the land of opportunity. I think that Vegas is a land of opportunity, and that can mean a lot of different things to different people, but that's what comes up for me in terms of what it means to me.
Yeah, it's the American dream. I mean, Vegas last year I think was the number 1 or number 2 city with the most out-of-staters moving into Las Vegas.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. I mean, it totally makes sense.
So
I believe it.
People are starting to notice, and especially if you look at people that work on the Strip, I think the majority of them aren't from Vegas. So people come here for
oh my gosh, they call
all
it
kinds of
transient
reasons.
or whatever. It's like, well, because people come here for a reason. People see that like there's some sort of meaningful potential for them there. And the thing about it that I feel apprehensive about is that I don't want to make it seem like I think that Vegas is this bootstrap town where, all you have to do is show up, and then you can suddenly cross, class lines and like, just totally remove yourself from like intergenerational poverty or any of the other things that are actually going to get in the way of you potentially, having any sort of mobility, social mobility. Those things still exist in Vegas. It's not that Vegas is this magical place where all those things like disappear. And also, there are things about Vegas, I think, if nothing else, I mean, the price of living, right? Like, if nothing else, like our rent, the rate of rent in this city, there are things about Vegas that make it, like, accessible and that make it accessible and welcoming and inclusive in ways that some of the other places in the country don't.
Yep. So many different opportunities, so many communities. Everyone has a home, whether it's on the Strip, downtown, there's Chinatown, you have Summerlin, Henderson, all these different towns. Everyone can find a place, but you do have to hustle, as you were saying.
That part, yeah, for
hustle
sure.
all day. Jazz, this was amazing. And if somebody wants to reach out to SWAN, get involved, where do they do that, and how do they follow you?
Yeah, so I'll start with mine, I guess, and then end on SWAN, which I hope everybody connects with. My handle is just at Jazz like Jupiter, so JAZZ like Jupiter. And the information for SWAN is I'll start with our website. You can go to SWANevada.org. So really it's like SWANevada.org, and I'm just gonna like read it out. SWANevada.org, right? And then our handles for both Twitter and Instagram it's the same. It's at SWANevada. And the same for our Venmo and Cash App too, actually. We try to make donations super accessible. If anybody, like, I don't know, hears this podcast and is like, that sounds like something cool and wants to tip us $5, you're welcome to do that. It goes towards supporting the sex worker community in Nevada. And I think that's all the connecting information I can give and share. I mean, I'll like text you anything else, I guess, maybe that I think of later.
Yeah. Whoever is watching or listening, the information is tagged below. So make sure that you go follow them, and also stop what you're doing now. Make sure you're subscribed if it's on YouTube, on Spotify, and if you're on Apple, please leave a review, preferably 5 stars, so that we could get this upvoted. Leave a comment and all that fun jazz. Like, subscribed, please, you guys do that. And so
thank you so much, Jake. I really appreciate you making space for something special like this in Vegas. We need more of it, and I'm really grateful that you're the one doing it. It feels so special and exciting. I'm really pleased to have been here and participated with you.
Thank you, Jazz. Your support as well as SWAN is very meaningful, so we could build this platform and shed spotlight onto all the different things in Vegas that are happening and all the people, like I said. The guest list is to focus on the who's of Nevada and not the already saturated what's. So thank you everyone for listening, and I hope you guys are very informed because I learned a ton. And Jazz, we'll catch you soon.
Thanks so much. Have a good